Hi, I'm Rodi Srivastava,
I'm Anuradha Nagaraj.
and this is The Migration Story.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Migration Stories Reporters Roundtable. We started this last year because we felt that, we carry incredible stories, and it was only fair to hear from the incredible journalists who write them about the process of writing them and the challenges they face, or, what excites them about doing these stories that we carry. It's our little way of giving you a sneak peek into, the world of reporting, the world of going to the field, gathering interviews, and then putting it together for what you finally read. So I'm really happy to have with us on this roundtable Maitreyee Boruah, Sanskriti Talwar, and Anuj Behal. All of them have written for us the migration story more than once, and from different geographies. I think that's what makes our platform so exciting. Maitri is joining us from Guwahati, Sanskriti is joining us from a very cold Delhi, and Anuj from an even colder Punjab. So I'll start with you, Sanskriti. So, you did this story from Azadpur Mandi during Delhi's heat, the North India's heat wave. And one of the images in that really stayed with me was this image of a worker who, they're loaders. And you can tell us a little more about the Mandi and these people. But the image was of this little pittu that the person was wearing. And your description for the photo caption was that it's made with, scraps of cloth, and they wear it on their back to protect themselves from their skin peeling off. So, I thought that visual in itself was so telling, and of course, the story was incredible. So, if you could walk us through Azadpur Mandi a little bit and tell us a little more about this story and this image.
I got a chance to interview one of the loaders, we call them palledars here, and they carry farm produce on their backs and heads, and then in the Azadpur Mandi. So while I was speaking to one of the loaders, I just wanted to understand his everyday life. That was my idea. Maybe I'll do a photo story around it. When I went, this was actually in March, and we were seeing the temperature peaking in Delhi. Like it was going up to 35 degrees Celsius in late March. So I just asked him, how are you dealing with this temperature? How are you working? And he was the one who pointed to me that, madam, if you really want to see the impact of heat on us, you should come in the months of May and June. And then he also pointed out that there were many loaders who had collapsed last year because of the heat and also died. And that's how the story got an extreme heat angle. I began visiting in the months of May and June. And while I was trying to also figure out what is this exactly they're wearing, they told me that they are made up of these burlap sacks that they anyway carry on their back, and they piece it together, wear it, and yes, it protects them because they carry very heavy loads on their backs. And in the photos you must have also seen that more than 50 kgs they also carry, like close to 100 also they carry these farm produce. And that's how I landed that angle also.
That's true, and just for context, like Azadpur Mandi is one of the biggest mandis that supplies vegetables across the capital, right? So quite an iconic space as well. And that image was really something. You hear of loaders, but to actually see, and though in that image he's not carrying anything, because then you can see the pittu, but it conveyed a lot. And similarly, Anuj, in your story from Ludhiana, I think the most striking image, it was the image of this person where you can't see the person's face, you can just see his hands and the front of his cycle. And in that little basket in the cycle, there is a mirror and there is a pouch of buttermilk.
Yeah.
And I thought that it said so much. So how did you come to click that image?
I think Ludhiana came to me because I think we were trying to particularly look on like how mobility impacts workers in general. And I think Ludhiana became a really interesting case because it's one of the biggest industrial clusters in India, first of all. And more interestingly, I think most of the people and workers especially commute on bicycles in Ludhiana. It's also because Ludhiana is one of the leading bicycle manufacturer itself, you know. What I was trying to generally do was just trying to go on these labor addas and trying to stand there and just see how people are moving, what they are carrying. And I think then only I came across this one person, a very old person again, carrying a mirror and a Verka, that is a replacement of like a Amul a lassi with him, you know, in his basket. And while I asked him, like, why you are carrying this lassi, because he was a cycle rickshaw driver. So the point was that, anyways, he's gonna be on the streets for the entire day. And I think to cope, they were using a lassi that they were like, at least this is the only thing which they will be able to get anywhere, because most of the things in the afternoons will not be accessible. Especially also these workers, if we have to contextualize, they are working in these industrial clusters where there are not much commercial spaces also. Mirror in general, I think we don't expect a person carrying a mirror with themselves, but I think they were carrying it to see their eyes frequently, because what they were saying is that because I'm pedaling through the cycle rickshaw for so long, I'm sweating so much that the sweat is getting into my eyes. And the moment it starts getting into my eyes too much, they start turning red. And to see that if it is turning red again, so that they can just go and access some nearby water tap or water connection and just wash their eyes off, so that they start feeling normal again. Again, a bizarre thing, because I wasn't expecting a mirror either in someone's basket. But yeah, that's what we saw while reporting about it.
Yeah, it was really interesting because, again, like I said, mirror is, I mean, you would expect a comb or you'll expect,
Exactly.
a lunchbox or something.
Yeah.
Maitreyee, you've done many stories, but the story that you did from Bangalore about how migrant workers are reacting to floods back home in Assam, I think it was a different and interesting perspective because it was looking at flood. Assam flood, the flooding is so routine now and it seems to get worse more every year. But there was an image in your story which was actually reported from Bangalore where Koes Ahmed Laskar is showing you his phone. And on the phone, he is showing you somebody he knows back in Assam whose house is flooded, this woman who's standing in water.
Yeah. So when I met Koes in a marketplace, KR Market in Bangalore, so he was talking about his own life, why he had shifted. In fact, he has migrated to Bangalore because of floods, because there are no livelihood opportunities for him out there. And he came to Bangalore when he was only 15. And then he said that even when I have traveled so far from my home, flood is also traveling with me. It never leaves them, basically. The migrant workers, they had to relive the trauma of floods even in a faraway land, because their loved ones are also suffering from floods at that time, and they cannot detach themselves from what they are going through. And during that conversation itself, he showed me that this is the situation in my village, and he showed several pictures, and one of those you have mentioned, and I think the lady is his aunt, and he showed me the amount of water that had entered inside their home and how it has affected their house, and at the same time the farmland has been affected. So yeah, it's like even they are away from their home, they are dealing with floods, and it is kind of a double jeopardy, because not only they are the victims of flood, but they have to undergo the experiences of their loved ones again and again.
Yeah, it's very true, when you say that it doesn't leave them. And, I had accompanied another reporter, Amulya, who was doing a story from Bangalore, and I had accompanied, I said, okay, I'll come and take photographs for you. And we had gone, and I remember we met this person who had come from West Bengal. And he was talking, and he was working here, collecting scrap and segregating waste, plastic waste. And when we were talking to him, he described, he used to own a nursery in West Bengal from where he came in his village, and he was describing how he used to grow flowers, and just the description of his geography juxtaposed with him segregating plastic literally in a dump was so disturbing and so contrasting. It was really interesting, and in this case, I think for him to start talking about his home and that garden and that nursery and his memory associated with it, and how his wish that he'll go back, it took him some time to come to the point of talking to us about that nursery. And I think as journalists, one of the things a lot of us, at least I face, and I would love to hear from you, I face, is like to get people to really convey the experience they're going through and not just tell us what is absolutely already visible to the eye. So how do you sort of approach this process of talking to people where you go beyond what is visible?
I think sometimes what I do is like you mentioned, we are dealing with some very complex phenomenons out here, like climate change, global warming. But I think sometimes going and asking them very basic questions about like, were you able to eat this morning? What was your dinner last night? Sometimes all these basic nudges are actually helps you enter the narratives of their lives. Because I think most of these workers and people in general who are migrants or community, I think, are able to articulate all these phenomena in better formats when they are asking about their own self rather than about these larger phenomena. So, for example, if you ask them, were you having joint pain or are you having fever these days? So I think all these kind of questions help to break that barrier and help me at least to get deeper into what they are sensing or what they are feeling. And I think which also becomes easier for us to report, because then when you're reporting it in that fashion, like what they are feeling and what they're going through, I think the lived realities of climate change becomes really more visible. I think as a reporter, I think one thing which I have tried to also see is that the less you know sometimes is more. Because the more you know about, oh, this is about these complex phenomena, you try to go into these directions which are tangentially, I mean, which would rather be distracting and will not even lead to any answers. So I think sticking to the very basics of their own life is, I think, really important to me.
No, that makes sense. This less is more. I really like the way you captured the idea of less is more. How has your experience been, Maitreyee? Like, is it easy for you to get people to, share certain parts of their lives with you?
Most of the times they have been very, very forthcoming. And if you meet them several times, they tell you everything. They tell you everything. They will even show you their jewelries and the amount of money they carry in their wallet. So, of course, they tell you, and they are very intelligent people. We tend to think that I know more, I will ask them questions. It is basically they who ask me questions most of the time. And it's basically listening to them. And they tell a lot of things actually, which sometimes most often doesn't come out in the story. I also do not write, or sometimes they get edited, and it's always a pleasure to talk to them. They give you the real perspective, they show you the reality.
I totally agree with you. Even I am way more comfortable. I think most of us are very comfortable talking to people. And also, it's like you said, somebody once told me, I think it was an editor in my earlier days, who said that, sometimes nobody has asked these questions, and therefore sometimes people talk, and people also want to share. So it's just how you approach it and what they see value in. Sanskriti, again, like, you already mentioned that the person actually pointed you in the direction of your story. But how easy was it once you had decided that you want to capture this? Also, given the fact that Azadpur Mandi is a very busy Mandi, and people are working constantly. That's another challenge. How do you capture these nuances during a busy work day?
It was initially very difficult for me because, they were always on the move and they had no time. So I just one day I went to the vegetable shed, this chaotic vegetable shed, and I kept standing at the corner and I was like, maybe someone will come, and when they put their load on the ground, I'll ask them whether they would be interested in speaking to me. And then came Ramakant, who is one of the characters from the story, and I asked him, like, I really want to speak to you. Is it a good time? I really want to speak in detail, okay? It's not like, hanji, kya ho gaya, theek hai aap hai. And he's like, madam, abhi koi time nahi hoga. If you really want to, know everything in detail, come before noon, like by 10 or after 4 p.m. I was like, okay, I'll do that. And it was not just that I went one day. I was going there almost every other day, and not just at the hours that the loaders had asked me to come at. I was also staying back, and that really helped me because I was there almost every day, every other day. They were seeing me with my camera, speaking with the loaders, and after speaking with Ramakant, I think a lot of them got comfortable because I was mostly standing or following the loaders, and many of them started gradually coming to me that why are you here, what are you doing here, and what is it that you're asking about. And when I shared it with them, they themselves told me about their experiences and the issues around it. And I mean, I feel like when you go very often and you make yourself visible, it really also makes them comfortable to open up with you. They do believe that you are here for them. It's not you're just gonna come here, do one story and just leave the space. When you go often, like even I still go, I mean, on days whenever I have time, whenever I'm in that area, and they do feel connected that yes, this person is coming here for a reason, and they do want to tell the stories. Even though they understand, sometimes there's this question come up, what will happen after this? I mean, yes, that happens, but like Ramakant, I quoted him also, where he said, like, nobody does anything for anyone. If someone is doing, he's like a god. And he said, like, at least you're coming to us to hear what we want to tell, and that is so much for us. And yeah, that makes a lot of difference. Like, showing up for them makes a lot of difference.
I agree. Showing up is like a thing, like it's something that makes a difference. But there are a lot of challenges in telling these stories. And one of the biggest challenges also is that how do you make these anecdotal experiences fit into a larger narrative? Should you at all? Should it necessarily fit into a larger narrative, or are individual experiences, anecdotal experiences enough to tell the story? What sort of ethical and practical dilemmas do you go through when you are thinking of stories like this? How do you prep for stories like this when you are trying to think, okay, how am I building this narrative? Is it enough? What is the emphasis of the narrative? How do you decide things like that?
Like for this particular story, because I'm also from Assam, so I know what happens during the floods. And when I met my Assamese migrants in Bangalore, we were both looking at Assam's flood from a distance. But it's not something impersonal. At least they have seen several devastating natural calamities in their lifetime. And these are communities which are like facing extreme challenges. On one hand, I try to focus on the climate change events like the devastating floods in Assam, and at the same time, how these environmental disasters pushes the vulnerable communities to a very huge and demanding labor market that exists in places like Karnataka. So I needed to bring these two pertinent issues together, and I just tried to see them navigating two impossible situations, and they are barely surviving. And in doing so, also, I read a lot before going and meeting people in terms of what kind of research materials are already available, whether people have already written something on Assamese migrants in Bangalore. Is it about floods or about their jobs or their what you call living conditions? So all these things I try to read, and I also try to get some kind of information about what the government is doing, whether Assam government is aware about their conditions, what kind of help do they provide. All those information I try to keep in my mind before venturing out. But often when I talk to them, these things are there, but more comes out during those conversations.
That's true. Like you get a lot more from, even if you prep when you go on the field, sometimes these conversations actually take you in a different direction also sometimes. How about you, Sanskriti? Like what are some of the basic challenges or ethical questions you face when you're trying to do these stories?
Like I try to bring in the Delhi's heat action plan. And while I was reading about it, I noticed there was no mention of informal workers itself. And then I tried to speak with the experts and some authorities off the record also, and they themselves helped me understand that these are just recommendations, they are not enforceable rules, and that's why they are not getting implemented on the ground. And that made me think, okay, now I have to speak to the authorities. What are they doing about it? I spoke to the APMC chief secretary. He declined to comment. I spoke to the president of one of the vegetable society or something like that, and he said we are providing from our end. It's the APMC's job to do it. I mean, both of them were blaming each other and deflecting from responsibilities. So when you get into this, it's kind of like piecing together puzzle, pieces of puzzle you're trying to fit in together. And I think that helped me while speaking to a lot of people at the same time, speaking to experts, even people who are not ready to come on the record. They also pointed out to me that check this out, this is not there. So yeah, I mean, that helped me a lot with the framing of this article.
Yeah, makes sense. Anuj, are you resonating with what Maitreyee and Sanskriti are saying? Because I remember we also had a conversation just before you were reporting the Ludhiana story, and we were also trying to understand how to approach it and what would be a good way to capture this. Yeah.
Exactly. I think largely, I think what Sanskriti was saying, I relate to it that I think there's this one very big ethical dilemma which I always carry is that to not end up treating communities as evidences of climate change, that you're not looking at these people and going for those anecdotes. So, like I said, I think in the previous point also, that I try rather when talking to these people that I'm just having a normal conversation. It's okay going back to the field again, going back to the people again and talking to them about different things and to not instrumentalize their suffering in any form. So I think it's also about like what Sanskriti and Maitreyee has already said, that also shifting back to the people who are accountable for. So tracing back structures when you come back from the field is also as important as listening back to these people. I think that this is what I all understood from this question actually.
No, true. I think this accountability factor is really important, what all of you are saying, because in a lot of narrative, it becomes highly anecdotal, and the onus of explaining what is going on, or the onus of everything happens to fall onto the community very often in many narratives, right? And then the accountability factor is often not pushed for enough. This we see in many stories, but yeah, so that balance is quite a tricky thing sometimes, I feel, because even when I do some of these stories, I think, like Maitreyee said at the beginning, the communities are really approachable. They talk to you, they trust you. And then you go to start finding this accountability, you start climbing the accountability ladder, and nobody's talking to you. And that is where it becomes really, for me, it's a real challenge. I'm like, but I need to have them answer these questions. But often, sometimes, like, nobody speaks to you. That is very true.
Listeners, we will be right back after this short break.
गांव का तो बात ही अलग है, गांव का हवा अलग है, यहाँ का पानी अलग है, वहाँ का पानी अलग है। अगर यहाँ बीमार पड़ते हैं ना, गांव जाते हैं ना, बिल्कुल हम सही हो जाते हैं।
Delhi runs on the labor of nearly 1.3 million construction workers. Every winter, as PM 2.5 pollution pushes the city's AQI into severe zones, the government triggers GRAP emergency stages and shuts down large parts of construction.
Watch the video story on how Delhi's construction laborers survive toxic air and anti-pollution curbs only on themigrationstory.com.
One of the other things that I wanted to really understand is, because all of us do this pretty much, on a daily basis, how does it impact you? How do you, as a reporter in the field, talking to people about, really tough lives? They have difficult lives, and largely most of our stories do spotlight that. How does it impact you?
I think these stories have a huge impact on me. Many times it has reminded me of my own privilege, and you are brought up in a certain way where you have your own sense of what is clean, what is dirty. But when you go on ground to report these stories, especially on vulnerable communities, you tend to question that a lot, because they are not in a place where you can think, okay, this is clean, this is dirty. They will be making use of whatever they have. And I would like to give an example with in the recent Yamuna floods, when I went to the settlements on the flood to speak to the migrants who are living in these settlements on the Yamuna floodplains, I went closer to the restricted area to see the level of the flood waters. And then suddenly a guy came and he filled a bucket with that water, and someone around asked him, "What are you going to do with it?" And this person said, "I'm going to give a bath to my child with that water," because that is the only source of water available with him. And I mean, these things stay with you, and it makes you question, like, what are we doing? What, I mean, all these things stays with me, and it make me think differently also then afterwards. Like, yeah.
Maitreyee, for you?
Yeah, like Sanskriti has already said, yes, it has impacted me a lot. Not because I was totally unaware of their situation, but because they've given me a new perspective about life and its many sufferings. And they're very resilient, I must say. No matter how bad the situation is, they try to find out a solution. And they will always carry a smile. Like, sometimes I feel like, what the hell? Like, there is no state machinery to help you out in your situation, but you are smiling and you are like, they tell you certain things that it's their responsibility, their situation. They have realized it over the time that there's nobody to help them out to get rid of all their problems, so they are on their own. So I think it's also conditioning. Like, if something wrong happens, we blame the government and all. They have seen so much, but their approach is little different. Yeah, so reporting on vulnerable communities have left a huge impression on me over the years.
Yeah, I hear you both, and like she said, privilege. I mean, privilege has become such a thing for me over the years, particularly post COVID. During COVID, actually, I think that's when it really, really hit, at least hit me personally. Anuj, how do you cope, or what do you take away or leave behind on the field?
I think, I mean, won't lie, because I think we see so much on everyday basis, and again, different setups and different geographies, that there's a tendency to forget also. I think I try to sometimes not think much about it after coming back. There are still things like which will always stay with you. Um, it will also change the way fundamentally we practice and we think also, because we see how people are managing in such scarce resources. And personally, I feel like I've been able to think more about my own footprint and be more responsible. I think that is one thing. And I think the one thing which I always see, which has also stayed with me, is the collective care we see on ground and within communities, which we don't see in general. I don't think we do care about people in our surrounding, even our families, the way we see communities for literally having no mechanisms of to cope, or even the governmental support, the way they come each other in terms of disasters, displacement, demolitions, even disasters like even climate change. I think the way they are helping each other out, and even on those very small moments, is what we don't see in general. So I think that stays with me. I think that the possibility that one day we can at least be able to come together is there. So that kind of optimism also comes to me when I go and see things on ground.
I think one thing that I reflect upon a lot, and I think some of my biggest life lessons have come from communities that I have reported on, actually. And in retrospect, I have realized that, oh my God, this was so relevant. Was that also this idea that, what both Maitreyee and Anuj both touched upon is that, they as a collective is something phenomenal, which, we can only aspire to be in our urban settings, or in our apartments, or wherever we live. It doesn't come together for us like it comes together for them. And also the fact that, they, like she said, Maitreyee said, they smile in such adverse conditions that it puts me to shame if I have to whine about some very tiny thing that has happened, right? And I'm like constantly thinking that, okay, look, I just met these people, and yet, there's a smile, there is, let's have chai, So my favorite moments of the field are the food that I share with people I'm talking to, or the cup of chai. People do tell you their stories, but like Matthew said in the beginning, like they sometimes also show you things that, they're proud of. They talk to you about things, friendships. They talk to you about so many other things, And in fact, I don't know, have you all watched The Homebound yet, the movie?
No, I haven't.
I have not.
Sanskriti, you have watched it, right? One of the things in that film is also just the fact that they've shown the regularity of their homes, how the family dynamics, how they tease. It's just so beautifully captured, right? The joy, how he teases his mother about her chappal and the food, and yeah.
I mean, we often underestimate that for a lot of people, using humor is also a way of coping with grim realities.
Exactly, that's true.
I mean, this was again, if I give you an example, I was at one of the relief centers for just after the Yamuna floods, and I was speaking to this very old man. He was in his 70s, and he was with his family, his daughter-in-laws. And I just asked him, "You don't even look like 70." And he's like, "No, no, अभी तो मेरा उम्र हो रहा है, मैं तो अब तो बस मेरा time आ गया है." And then there was this playful exchange between that uncle and his daughter-in-law, and she went on like saying, हाँ हाँ इनको तो यमुना मैया आती है ले जाने. And he's like, अरे जब आएगी तो चले जाएंगे, यमराज जी बोले हैं जब चल भैया खाता पूरा हो गया तो अपन चल देंगे. And I was like, oh my god. I mean, in that playful exchange, they had just spoken of Yamuna River as if it's death itself in that flood situation.
Which probably it is.
If it, yes.
Polluted and everything else.
But then I have been learning this a lot, that people cope up with this tragedy with a lot of humor.
Yeah, the self-deprecating humor is supposed to come from that, right? Like it's your defense mechanism against a lot of things. And I guess communities also do that. But one of my favorite things that bring me a lot of joy is when I go to the weekend market near my home, right? And I live pretty outside the city, so it's like peri-urban. So, the Sunday market, around me there's a lot of construction, as there is in every city. I'm in Bangalore, so it's no different. But on Sundays, all the workers who otherwise working through the week, they come to the same market that I go to, because it's just this amazing market with fresh produce, right? And that is where there is a samosa shop. As you see, I'm so many food references I'm throwing in, which is run by this person from West Bengal, pretty close to my heart. And you can't go to the Sunday market and not eat one of those, as they call singara, but I will say samosa because that's what I'm more familiar with. And the conversations, there's a lot of joy in that space. For that half an hour that, people come out to pick up their sabzi, grocery, eat that samosa, chit chat and go back. So, what are your impressions? Have there been people on the field or encounters that have just, you've gone back home and you still smile about it when you think about it?
I think from the most recent experience which I had, I was in Alang, okay, so this ship breaking yard. I think one of the beautiful things about migration is that people migrate and they forget that they migrated. And I think then when you're asking them questions about, when did you came back to the city? And they'll have no clear answers. I think that's, to me, is really funny, because I feel like sometimes we try to document our life so neatly. Okay, 2017, I'm here. This year, I'm doing this. But I think these people have no clue when they have actually moved to a different city altogether and kind of started new life together. And I think that's really, again, it amuses me in a different way. But I also feel like when asking these questions and trying to be more logical and just about like, okay, let's try tracing out the best year when they must have come to the city. I think I come across this method where, like, for example, I think in Alang only, I was talking to this woman who was showing me this guddi she made, okay? This women who have migrated from Gorakhpur, and they usually don't make such kind of quilts out there. So there's a quilt which they do with hand kantha stitch, which is a very popular Gujarati thing. So she was making one actually when I first met her, and then I was like, oh, kab se bana rahi hu? And then she was like, oh, this is my 7th one. I made 6 before. And then she went back inside and showed me all the 6 guddi she had made, And then she talked about the first one, that this happened when my first child was taking birth. I was preparing this one. And I was like, how old was your first child then? And she was like, he is 32. And my question was like, कब हुआ पहला बच्चा यहाँ आने पर, हुआ या वहाँ हुआ? And she was like, यही हुआ वो बच्चा दूसरा साल था. So I was like, how old is your son now? And she's like, he's 32. And then she's like, okay, so this means you've come to the city 34 years back or something, right? Again, I think these are my methods of finding when people have migrated where, but I think in general, you come across so many other stories which help you to go there. For example, when I was talking to them constantly, like, how was it seeing such big ships in Alang, which was a shipbreaking yard of a sort? So she's like, oh, इतना बड़ा तो हमने ताजमहल ही देखा था सबसे पहले, वो भी एक ही बार गए शादी के पहले. And so I think in those little moments of life you also understand like how all these things shape their worldview to see things.
Yeah, also just how life is, how,
Yeah.
I mean, you've gone to see the Taj, you've now come here to work, you've made a quilt when you were expecting. It also just gives a rhythm and regularity to life outside of extremes, right? That we try to capture as journalists. Yeah. Maitreyee?
Yeah, actually, there are many. Every time I go there, I meet people. There are some lovely stories that I carry back. I would like to mention one story, like for this particular copy that we are talking about. I met one person called Rajan Fukan. He's from Assam's Dhemaji. He told me that he first came to Bangalore some 20 years ago, and then his first job was that of a security guard. And over the years, he started his own farm also, and now currently some 700 people are employed in his company. As he was telling me all these details, he suddenly mentioned that, I'm married to a Kannadiga woman. So I am the son-in-law of Karnataka. If I am the son of Assam, I am the son-in-law of Karnataka. And he said that more and more people should migrate because they can not only find livelihood opportunities, but they can also find love and happiness. So it was some kind of a filmy story he told me, and I was so happy listening to that.
Yeah, we are all suckers for a good love story, right?
Yeah.
Like a happy ending. It's also that season, I don't know, like where you're watching all these really nice
Christmas movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Sanskriti?
I think for me, from this particular story was when I was speaking to Ramakant and his friends. So they were telling me how much of their earnings go into, sending it back home, into the rent. And one of the friends just, he came in and he was like, बाकी सारा तो मच्छी और मीट खाने में ही चला जाता है, रात को तो वही खाना है ना. And then the other one was like, नहीं खाएंगे तो जान कहाँ से आएगी इतना सामान उठाने. So I mean, I like that even they are so far away from home, they have this sense of strong community and they stick together. Like if they're from Bihar, they're like, ये तो मेरे गाँव से है, they have that kind of thing. And we'll eat machhi and we'll have our meat at night. Even if during the day we are not having anything, but by night we will have this. We'll make it together, cook it together and have it.
Yeah, and then, like I said, there's nothing like food and some entertainment that kind of binds us and also helps us connect, like both ways, on the field. I think it's mutual. I will quickly wrap this up with one last question. One is, have you been asked something when you are on the field that kind of you struggle to respond to? From, say, the people you're trying to interview, have they asked you a question that, you had to pause and think about, okay, how do I respond to this?
The most awkward question I always get is like, क्या करोगे ये सब जान के, क्या करने वाले हो? Like, and sometimes I feel like we're gonna write about it. And then the next question is like, फिर तो क्या? And I think that's a very difficult question because I think we as journalists are here to amplify the stories from ground. But sometimes to give a concrete answer to people that what we're going to do about these stories and if this writing will bring anything just to them is a big question, which makes me really uncomfortable. I think whenever I go on ground, because I feel like, because we also know that not every story will lead to an immediate impact on ground also, right? So I think this is a really uncomfortable question. I really get, and I think I'm still trying to figure out new ways of answering it to people. But yeah.
I hear you. This is a common question. And I think one of the reasons this question at least makes me uncomfortable is because I know that the answer, it's probably not going to do much in the longer scheme of things. Even however optimistic you are that your stories will have massive impact, somewhere that, the odds are not that great. Yeah. But Sanskriti, Maitreyee, any question that has like stumped you and made you say, oof, I have to answer this now?
Always there's one question that pops up is, are you married?
I hear you, yes. It used to happen.
Okay, you have this old. When are you going to get married? But now I have learned the trick. I mean, I tell them, yes, my parents are looking for a groom, but tell me, what about your love story?
Yeah, deflect it.
Yes. And then, they end up telling me their love story, and that's just how I deflect it.
True. This question gets asked a lot, particularly women journalists
Yes.
of a certain age. Yeah, Maitreyee?
Yeah, I have also been asked about my age, my marital status, how many kids do I have, and sometimes I lie. I just lie because I don't have a proper answer to some of these questions. So, because I cannot just stay silent and not say anything because they are expecting something from me, and especially regarding children, and also I do lie.
Yeah, no, these are very standard questions that you do get asked. And then, the dilemma is that, I'm going to ask them 2 million questions now. So, how much should I tell? And, what's the quid pro quo in this situation? And any recommendation, something you all have seen recently that you think people should also watch, or something you've read?
I would suggest reading this book, The Many Lives of
Saida X.
Yes.
Neha.
By Neha.
Yeah, we had her on one of our podcasts some time back. Yes.
A really good book.
Anuj?
I think one of the books I read in the last 1 month, I think I would recommend Small Boat. It's a really good book. It's deeply about borders, migration, and the moral responsibility of people.
Okay, Small Boat, The Many Lives of Saida X. Maitreyee?
I'm reading Mother Mary Comes to Me by Arundhati Roy.
Okay.
I would recommend it to everyone. I think most of the people are reading it because I feel you can learn so much about India in the last at least 4 decades. Whatever has happened to India, its people, and current politics and all. And it is beautifully written. Oh my God. So much to learn from every line. And since I'm from Assam, so everyone should listen to Jubin Garg's song. I'm also doing that. And then everyone should eat jhalmuri. It's a popular snack from Assam and Bengal. So yeah.
I think Maitreyee has summed it up really well. She's given us food for thought. She's also given us a book recommendation and music. So thank you all so much. I hope you all have a lovely year end, and really looking forward to more newer and interesting stories to tell in 2026. Maybe all be on the field a lot, maybe all write a lot. Thank you so much for taking time out for this. Yes.
Thank you. It was lovely talking to you all.
Yes.
Check out our website www.themigrationstory.com for more content. You can subscribe to our podcast on YouTube and Spotify. The audio editing and sound design is by Akshay Ramuhalli. Stay tuned for more stories on migration.
The Migration Story.